I'm curious what the biggest underwriting challenges are for Canisure being in such a unique space like cannabis.
The reinsurance support of this industry has been fantastic and limiting at the same time. So the reinsurers allow us to operate in the capacity that we do, but that capacity, as I mentioned, doesn't increase in a limits perspective on both the property and the liability side. So they're kind of keeping us at bay in terms of coverage growth, limits growth, and then kind of pricing. So pricing, when you think about it, they're expecting the future claims conversations to happen, especially in the product liability standpoint. So we're getting some pushback on pricing overall to the book of business, regardless of loss experience, because there's still a great unknown relative to our overall what is 3 years down the road, 10 years down the road going to look like. So that's one of our main underwriting challenges because the underwriters want to do certain things here at Canisure, but might be, constricted by the reinsurance support that we receive. Again, good problem, bad problem. But what about the CBD space? I spoke to the Farm Bill a little bit. The CBD hemp product world is growing rapidly, and you're seeing some states trying to restrict those industries because the cannabis industry is doing so well. So there's a big conflict. I mean, it's really a fight between industry segments, and we're not terribly comfortable with the regulatory environment of the CBD hemp space because it's not as tight and strong as the cannabis. So as an underwriter, we're challenged by looking at those next grouping of accounts in the CBD hemp space. Lee and I have had this conversation a number of times specific to the state of Minnesota, and then you got Tennessee and Kentucky, Texas, the Carolinas, Indiana, Iowa. I mean, there's a whole bunch of states that aren't even having cannabis conversations that are going crazy on CBD hemp. And yet we're not really being able to help those industries from an insurance standpoint because we don't trust the regulatory environment. And then you got a whole nother product line in Kratom. Like we're completely hands off on Kratom, but we receive a question a week on what's the next Kratom coverage opportunity. And it's surely not coming from Canisure, but those are some areas in the space that we get challenged on and sometimes don't have a good answer.
That is interesting of like, we're not willing to be cannabis. We'll be completely cannabis adjacent.
Yeah.
And it's not as regulated, which is the irony, but yeah, that's a whole separate thing. What about for you, Lee? Are there any specific cannabis risks or coverages that you have a hard time finding placement for in this market?
Over a year ago, I would say the intoxicating hemp space was a little bit more of a challenge. I mean, there was still a handful of markets, and I think more people are getting on board, more carriers are getting on board with insuring, say your hemp derived, intoxicating hemp derived beverages, for instance. There's a number of markets now that are looking at those. So I wouldn't, that's not really an issue anymore, but it is, like as Jim was saying, we don't know what the long-term, regulatory environment is going to look like, on a state level, but also on a, potential federal, oversight over that industry. Because it is a loophole. I mean, it wasn't intended, the Farm Bill was not intended to allow these intoxicating hemp products to be out in the marketplace. So it is a loophole, and that can always present challenges, when you're trying to prognosticate the future of that environment.